copy here, which is
Just on the north side of this.
flat, which doesn't show the drainage
Under the
is.
driveway.
Right.
And then I suppose is this they're like grading up to the house then, or is that already?
Yep.
Do you know with I know there's like a drainage back here, is that kind of just estimated not to be affected that much then?
I think it's worth asking.
You got $5.
So, their engineers here.
Oh,
Yep.
your grandson.
Okay. Let me use your used copy case. I can't see it. I can make more copies.
Oh, sure. Yep. Yeah, well,
Of which page might be it? Because a lot of these pages people don't need copies of.
Okay, you tell me which page.
I think that this
Second page in of
C 5.0 is a good one.
that'd probably be the best. And if you want to make it off of this copy, the contours are a little bit easier.
Okay. Because the whole packet is.
Yeah, we're gonna make some more.
Right? That's what you're saying. To be an engineer to read it and understand it.
is the engineer there? We'll find out.
Yes,
Right.
that's it.
Let's call the meeting to order. It's 4:02. Let's show that the chair is here. This is your chair, Mike. What'd you do to it?
What did you do to it?
I don't know. Let the record show that Lisa Gergitz is not in attendance. The purpose of this afternoon's meeting is to review the final plat for the Nordic Star subdivision, which is the one roof housing proposal for on Second Street West in the city. We have before us a final plat drawing and also engineering drawings showing the stormwater drainage. Julie, do you have anything that you want to present on this, or?
I guess I would just like to say thank you for calling the special meeting. I felt it was important that our engineer, Tom Marais, be here to explain the stormwater management plan envisioned for the site. I'd also like to share that we just met with Mitch Travis, Wetlands from the county, and all of that work is in process and going very well. So,
Okay.
it's all
So,
looking
so
good.
with that, at our last meeting, when we approved the preliminary plat, we had some concerns and questions about the stormwater runoff, and the reason we are having this meeting as a special meeting was because you could not make the regular planning commission meeting due to a conflict, and we think it's an important aspect of this development, the stormwater management, and to have you here, I think, is important. So, I mean, I'd appreciate it if you maybe just come up to the table and can walk us through the stormwater management proposal that you have.
Right. Would you be able?
Excuse me before you start. Joyce, do you
Can I get a copy of, you have extra copies?
Did somebody go?
I think
Mary's
they're still making
Yeah.
it, so,
Thank you.
yeah.
Should we maybe just want to wait till she gets back? People can follow along easier.
Okay. And we will have opportunity for public comments, and when we do open that up for public comment, please come up and state your name so that you can be on camera. Tina can get your name on the record.
Oh, look, that's really sorry. Can you just come back here and step on everybody's toes now? Oops. You have this too. Okay.
Just want to say thank you for having us up here and giving us the opportunity for having another meeting. Apologize for not being able to being able to be at the last planning commission meeting. I'm Tom DeMarais. I'm with North End Consulting Engineers. We're an engineering firm out of Duluth, just down the shore. We specialize in site design and stormwater management. It's kind of our niche that we have down there. So we do a lot of work in Duluth and surrounding communities and then off the shore as well. We've been working with One Roof to both from the beginning to kind of find the best layout for this project as far as different access points, whether we wanted to come from second or third, how many units we could fit in, avoiding the wetland conflicts as much as possible, and then one of the big reasons why we're here today is for the stormwater management plan. When we put together a plan like together as this is, we are first thing we do is we look at our existing conditions versus our proposed conditions. And this is a larger site, and being that it is a larger site, mainly over the main tipping point for the state of Minnesota, but we also look at these for all projects, is anything over 1 acre, and this is very easily, you can tell by looking at the map that it is over 1 acre. These numbers are on the back of the last page, which is part of the SWIP, the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. And then when we get to that point, we are regulated by the state of Minnesota to follow MPCA guidelines for stormwater management. And as part of this plan, we had to put in, we worked to maintain the existing drainage ways to keep the wetlands connected, but then also grade the houses to keep water out of the houses, and then also slow down the runoff that is coming off of the new impervious surfaces, creating what would be, if it wasn't managed, additional runoff, faster runoff that would more instantaneously hit these culverts. And so we work to ensure that that doesn't happen, and that's part of this plan. And you can see with the grading plan, the direction of flow and how we're getting it through the site. What it doesn't specifically address on this plan is where we're implementing infiltration swales to capture some of this water and let it slowly soak into the ground. So as the platting process, that's not quite there, but that is part of what has to be submitted to the MPCA for a project like this to get permitted. It will have a series of ditch checks to slow down the water, and also those infiltration swales, as I said, on each site to capture water and let it infiltrate into the ground before it is released into ditches, streams, culverts, what have you. And if it would be helpful to me to, we don't have we just have the 11 by 17, so you each have an individual plan. I don't know if it would be helpful to maybe run through the different areas that this is running, or if you have questions, we can start with those as well.
Well, I think, one of the concerns that, I think we've all heard the neighbors that are below the property across Second Street,
Right.
down below, express concerns about runoff coming off the site that might impact their properties, and how that runoff is going to be managed and how it might affect their properties. I think would be helpful to understand.
Right.
If you have some explanation. I know, I mean, I can see that the major drainage is that's coming down along the side of the access road.
Correct.
And from what it appears is that will turn 90 degrees at the street and then
Head west.
run to the west, to the east to a culvert, down the street a ways. And I mean, that I think, is one area that I would like to hear some comments about how you are going to address that drainage and that 90-degree corner, and how that continuation of that flow to the south would impact neighbors
Right.
that are located to the south of Second Street.
Yes. So one of the first things that we want to do is try to avoid running water into that ditch immediately as much as possible. Try to get it to sheet flow to other areas of the site to kind of dissipate the energy that it has, slow its progress down before it gets into this ditch. Inevitably, when you're designing a road, designing houses, it's going to get channelized flow, and you're going to get flow into that ditch. As it's coming down that ditch, we have a series of so-called ditch checks. It levels the surface out, slowing it down into the next stream, and it also, again, like those infiltration swales, gives it a chance to infiltrate into the ground. Now, we are on a hill, so the infiltration isn't as valuable as slowing it down itself and keeping it out of that ditch. But with the ditch checks, what I can say is it's slowing it down, and we have it modeled, whereas we are not putting any more water into that culvert at a higher rate than before the project. There might, with what we're doing, we're slowing it down, so there is inevitably going to be more runoff because you are taking away trees, but what we have to do is manage that runoff and make sure it gets released from the site in a slower matter of time. So that culvert is not seeing any additional flows than it was before the project started.
Have you looked at that culvert down there by the church? I've walked there all the time, and I've seen it pretty much at capacity, it appeared to me.
Right, and that was another thing that Julie with One Roof asked me to address, is that the culvert across 2nd Street. Now, doing my modeling as we go forward with the development, I am not increasing the flows to this culvert, but if you were to go and examine the culvert today, it is in a failing state. So we suggest that the city look at the culvert, look at its condition. Does that culvert itself need to be replaced? It may, because it's not handling the capacity that it was designed for. When you do that to that culvert, it does go downstream to the next area as well. But the culvert that we are on the west side of the project is in a failing state. So we suggest examining that culvert, seeing what needs to happen there, and we can sure add it to this project, but it would also be a city add to the project. But it should be addressed as part of this plan.
So you're stating that you believe that both of those culverts
That is
are failing?
it is the culvert that is to the east, to the west of what would be the new
Entrance
access
road.
road. Correct.
Right.
The culvert on
14.
Second by 14th Avenue.
Right.
West of 14th?
Yes,
West of 14th.
yes.
You're looking at it, it's just to the left, if you're the west or to the left-hand side of.
This one and this one. This is the one the city had.
The culverts, in my opinion, examining them, the culverts that were in between the development and also on the east side looked like they were in good shape. And we also do bridge inspections for St. Louis County and the state, and so it's not something that, and we design bridges and culverts for St. Louis County, Cook County, we haven't done any for Cook County, but Lake County, Hermantown, Duluth, and so we have bridge experience as well. Bridge and culvert.
So do you have in these drawings show that any detail of those?
The swales?
The swales, we
swales.
don't have the infiltration swales detailed.
Okay.
They're in the model, but we don't have them. It's part of the process. It's kind of we have them in the model, and you play with the site, your contours, your areas, and as you're putting that in the model, you're figuring out how big of what you need to build, and then we implement that into this kind of as a final plan set that we would then submit to the state. So it's not there for the plating, but it is there for a stormwater management submittal.
Will those swales be required as part of your permit with MPCA?
Yes.
And
What will be required is Was the question, will it be required or what will be required?
Will it be required as part?
Yes, it will be required, so we provide them a full set of plans. We provide them the details of the swales, both the size, which the length, the width, and also the depth of the media that will be in those swales, and then also the calculations for all of our areas on the site that include what was previous of the site, and then also now the areas of the homes, the roads, woods, grasses, and then it gives a hydrograph, a number of where our flows are going and the rate that they're going off of the site. So that is all submitted to Minnesota Pollution Control Agency before construction can start.
What's the timetable on that, their approval or finally signing off?
It is, I believe, it is a 2-week approval process, which is it's fairly quick as far as state standards go. We send them in, and they review our plans, and I believe they have a 2-week review process. It's either 2 or 3 weeks that they have to review our plans.
The 90-degree bend when it hits Second Street, the ditch in Second Street.
Right.
What's the plan for turning that water other than the street?
I haven't experienced a problem with that before. Like I said, we are putting ditch checks along there to slow it down before, so it slows down your rate of flow to get down there and its velocity. There's the culvert that's crossing that house, the last house along that access road. But then it's a natural channel flow that acts like a river.
Yeah.
Can't say it's any. I don't have a better explanation than that's really. It's pretty basic.
I mean, all I know is that from previous experience, just to the east of there, the same kind of situation occurred, and it just about took out the road during a big storm. I mean, even though there might be ditch checks and that kind of thing, they work only to a certain
To an extent,
And
right.
when we seem to have 100-year storms every 5 years, concern about the impact of that straight line drainage on that street. To me, it seems like there needs to be some attention paid to that particular location and how that water is going to get turned.
Now, this wouldn't be, I don't want to keep on referring back to my calculations and the modeling and this, not because a lot of what it comes down to is real practicality in making this work. So it wouldn't be included in that, but one thing that we could add, if it would make the city and residents feel more comfortable, is we could add some sort of armoring around there, riprap armoring that you see on larger blocks, culverts, whatnot. They provide and then you would, below that riprap would be a geotextile fabric that separates the rock riprap from the soils and environment underneath it and really protects it, slows it down, and that would protect it as well. And they use those along riverbanks and really building up dike systems as well, so that's a pretty proven method. We don't have it implemented in here, but if that's something that, I think that would be on an ad that one roof would be willing to look at to add that there. And it would be something that would be very feasible.
Well, a good example is if you go between 9th and 10th, just to the east, the neighbors there spent considerable amount of money on their own to address that same kind of an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, it just about took out the road. And it seems to be working okay now, but there was a significant change to the original drainage that came down the hillside, and it's very similar to
Sure.
this, so
Right.
it might be worthwhile to go and take a look at what they've done there to see what might need to be done in this kind of situation too.
I'd be more than happy to.
I have a question as to what standard are you building to? I mean, we have 100-year floods every 10 years,
We build into
or
the
5
100.
years, I think. That's
Right, and they're becoming
So
more
what-
and more frequent. We build to the 100-year standard
Okay.
Can I ask a question, or is it?
you have to.
Let's leave it with the planning commission now. We will open it up.
Because I think you should have something here that the people can see what you're talking about, like where the culverts would go here on Second, are there like 3 culverts?
They're shown on there. They're shown on there. Yeah, I know.
Really hard to-
They're small, they're small. Any questions?
And I can continue to take
Yeah,
questions.
just
I'm
to-
just going to mark this up for her.
Just to, I think, reinforce what Tim is saying. You know, I think for 10 years now or so, most people have realized the 100-year precautions probably aren't adequate.
Right.
And especially since so much of this is on a slope, there's about a 20-foot drop, I think, from at the start of that straight run. I would have assumed you would have already had something like riprap or some sort of armoring in there. Yeah, I would say you have to take precautions beyond what you might normally consider. Every year, we have rains that wash out roads here, it seems. And those roads were all designed with the best intentions.
Right.
So that, I think that's a concern. You had mentioned, you know, at the end of all this, you've done a calculation that says, I want to get the language right, the rate of flow?
The rate.
The
That's
rate
correct.
of flow will not exceed what it currently is.
Correct.
Will it be as dispersed as it used to be?
And so that's the dispersion is the rate. So we have to disperse it over more time to slow that rate down. Now the volume itself, the overall volume, is going to increase, but the rate or the rate will stay at or below. If
No, I understand.
if that
But
makes sense.
once you've left the boundary of the development, the rate should remain the same.
Correct.
And just a question for the builders of the development. How will these precautions that they take be maintained over time?
Yeah.
Is there anyone who can speak to that? Did that question get all the way to the back there, whoever is talking?
We are going to take on the road maintenance for Nordic Star Drive. That will be continually maintained through Run Roof, at which time we are also going to make sure that the way this has been engineered, that all of these ditchings are the way that they're supposed to remain.
And that will include the swales and...
Correct.
And there's a maintenance program, kind of a checklist that we provide as well to say every year, every 6 months really. And the best time to do it is spring, fall. Check for debris, check for collection of solids, check for garbage. All those factors that we do provide a maintenance schedule to maintain these devices.
The other thing we will be working on is creating information, documentation for the new homeowners that explains that this site has been professionally engineered, that these swales are put in with the grading, and that they need to remain that way, so the stormwater actually, the plan works the way it's anticipated, making sure that our homeowners don't manipulate those swales in any way, and making sure that education is there for them.
Which is very important, and also to communicate that to the contractor that this has to be built per the
Correct.
plan. I get many questions after our plans go out to bid and a contractor gets on site for other projects and they see something going through their site that they are about to build a channel here, a channel there, swales, and they want to fill it in with dirt because it'd be easier and cheaper just to run it down there, and we can, save money on transporting and this and that. And well, you can't do that because it violates state code and it defeats the purpose of the design. So that's part of the construction admin, which we are on board with One Roof to be there to make sure that these are built to design, but then also, like Julie said, that it is important to relay this to the homeowners that they need to keep these as they were built.
I just need a quick refresher. Is there an association in place for this development?
There's not.
Okay, so One Roof is maintaining this in the years going forward? How does that work?
It's subdivision would be a land trust model.
Okay.
Where One Roof holds the deed to the land, and then the homeowner buys the house. But, it's a deed control. It'll work good in this instance where they will have control of the property and maintaining the stormwater. That's designed that way to keep it in the workforce affordability range, so that when a person buys a home and lives there for a while, goes to sell it, there's a prescribed inflation rate, and they can't flip it for double, for instance, so if it's workforce, it'll stay in workforce, but in this instance, it'll.
Yeah, just with that, I mean, in the packet of information that was sent out, there was a declaration that spelled out those terms, that One Roof is responsible for that road maintenance. It's a private road dedicated to One Roof, and they retain, the responsibility to maintain that road. I mean, this is different in the sense that because this is a land trust model, it's the owners, the homeowners are not the owners of the land. So One Roof retains that responsibility. Now, they may delegate some of the costs for that maintenance to the owners, but that's not our deal. That's their how they choose to provide the funding for the maintenance of that road. And again, it's a little bit different than what we've seen in the past because the ownership is not going to change hands.
So, somebody brought up earlier that the alignment that's shown on the final plat drawing, the dedicated space for the road lines directly up with the dedicated right-of-way across the street. The survey grading plan drawing kind of shows the built road being a little bit offset west of where the street is across the way. And I'm wondering, how does this all fit? And is the road shifted out of center from what's drawn on the plat? Is the ditching that is planned included in the dedicated road, or is it not all included in the dedicated road?
I think it might be a little confusing when you're looking at the plat drawing, which kind of shows the legal conditions more than the physical. It's a document about the legal boundaries of the parcels. And on there you're seeing the 66-foot wide right-of-way for 14th Street down below there. Okay, so that is not the same as what you're seeing where the pavement is at the top, because that's not really centered in that right-of-way.
So my question is more about, is the road for this development centered in the 40-foot dedication? And is the ditch that's designed inside of the 40-foot dedication, or is it partially in and partially out?
So your question is just up on the
Yeah,
right,
and it's
okay.
kind of at the, if One Roof has the dedication and that's the trigger for their maintenance requirement, but not all of the ditch and features is actually inside of the dedication, how does that work?
One Roof still owns the rest of the land.
Right.
They're still
The
responsible
ditch,
for all of it.
the road is centered inside of the 40-foot right-of-way.
Okay.
However, the ditches do extend outside of that, and that's the nature of the narrow right-of-way, being that One Roof is maintaining the property and also maintaining the access agreement for the driveway.
So did I
With the 40-foot right-of-way rather than what is becoming more and more standard, a 66-foot right-of-way at what would be a city road.
So did I hear that right, in that you said that the road would be in the center of the road right away, which would seem to put it in the easement portion of the road, in the easement portion of the right of way. Does that seem right? I mean,
The physical road is centered in the 40-foot right-of-way. It's pretty clear on the engineering drawing, and the plat survey doesn't show the physical road at all. So, but the plat survey does show the 40-foot right-of-way.
I mean, I see the grading plan, and I can't tell where the easement is from the grading plan to the...
Yeah, it looks to me like the east side of that 40-foot right-of-way is actually west of the bottom of the ditch. There's a little dash.
That's correct.
That goes
So
through
there's a line with 3 dashes that, if it's a copied plan, might be a little bit harder to see, but I can come and show you where that line is if you'd like.
Yeah, I would appreciate that.
So we'll start here, and then we'll also start here on the bottom, bring it up to a corner here, and then that also runs up here. So this is your
Okay.
So as you can see, that this is the edge of the right-of-way line. The ditch does extend outside of that.
Okay, and so the construction area of the ditch will fall well beyond the edge of the right-of-way,
Correct.
and that will actually be in the,
And which is not, as far as the construction goes, especially the construction, is very often outside of the lines of the right-of-way. In that case, if this would be a normal public road process where this right-of-way was already established and there's private homeowners on the side here, you would be obtaining a temporary construction easement or a construction easement to be working outside of the right-of-way into their property. It would be, you wouldn't be allowed to have any utilities or anything else in that, but you are disturbing their private land at that point, so you'd need a temporary construction easement. Not necessary in this case because both the road / driveway and property is being retained by one roof.
and so will there be some kind of provisions in your lease agreement with the homeowners that you have the right to go in there and maintain and take care of those swales and drainage, part of that drainage system, which would be technically on their lot?
Yes, we are working with buyers to make sure that our lease coincides with all of the restrictions, maintenance, so on and so forth.
I guess I'm a little concerned that the documents we've seen now don't really require anyone to maintain
this ditch, even though that's what they've said their intention is. And I understand that the model we're talking about is for One Roof to operate this as a land trust, but once the final plat's approved, it's approved,
Yep.
whether they operate as a land trust or not, or, they can sell these lots to anybody they want tomorrow. So I wonder if there's not an additional piece that we need to add in to the declaration, or another drainage easement or something that we can just kind of add as some documentation that they're going to maintain this stuff as well.
We'll be happy to.
And when you've done that in other communities, how have you addressed that? Has there been an additional declaration that's been provided to the city?
This is a new project that we're doing here. So we're really planning and working with the city to do whatever you require. Typically, when we've developed land trust houses in Duluth or neighboring communities, it's not as big a development. So it's basically one house at a time, which you don't have to deal with a lot of the issues that we're dealing with here today. So we are more than happy to work with whatever government agency we have to, and to meet their requirements, to make sure the development works for everybody.
And I'll speak to the stormwater side of that. One thing that we're held to in other communities, especially Duluth, is that until our stormwater practices are done, complete, installed, the cities will not issue a certificate of occupancy or allow property to be sold from the contractor to a homeowner until those are done and signed off on. So that's another level of
Unfortunately, we don't
issue that.
don't issue
So-
certificates of
Well,
occupancy, don't
it makes
enforce
it harder. It
don't
makes it
enforce the
harder for
building
you guys
code.
to enforce that.
No, it does,
I can
it does.
understand that side of it.
Do we need to determine what the mechanism is today for guaranteeing One Roof's maintenance of these ditches? Or how do we, what hurdle do we need to cross today if this is our concern, that we're looking for a way to lock that down? How do we send that information back? How do we follow up to that request?
Well, if you have any particular requirements on it, you should say what they are. If you just want somebody to figure that out, I think that we can work with buyers and Julie and figure it out pretty easily. And if we were going to pass this on today and bring it to the council, that some mechanism would be identified before the council would look at it, and then they could decide if that was adequate.
So our recommendation would be to find that mechanism.
Yeah. Just to
And
deal
Make
with
sure
the
that we're addressing those
Yeah.
issues that we've identified that we think are, could be problematic. Yeah.
I think we've arrived at that concern from two different angles now, so I think it's important.
I would agree. Are there other concerns that, or questions that the commissioners would like addressed? Al, anything? You know, one of the things that I've kind of raised a question with Mike about was the lots 8, 9, and 10. That, and I suppose in reality, lot 12 too, but that they exist above that easement. And since most of that area above the easement is wetland and really non-usable, I'm questioning whether or not it makes sense to be including that portion of the property in the lots that really people are going to be developing and using below the easement on, on Third Street. Whether or not you've given any thought to just reserving that area above the easement as an outlot.
So at this point, we have absolutely no intention of doing anything above the trail. One of the questions I would have is, would that make these lots then non-buildable? Is there going to be enough area to build these houses? They're all anticipated to be below, but will that meet the city requirements as far as space?
Yeah, and I don't know whether that's an issue. With your grading plan, you've also put some potential building areas. Just at a glance, they look like they would meet setback requirements, if that's what you indeed used to build, although you can see some of the grading does kind of extend into the...
Right, grading, correct. The grading may extend outside of these setbacks, but there is lines, there.
But if we were to add a setback line from a new property line here instead of here, I think that the building areas are still okay. I think lot 8, from a square footage perspective, and from just a dimensional requirement, might not fit anymore. That's a lot 11 doesn't either, and so that's a variance that can be granted. Again, with the idea that you've got a pretty clear plan of how you intend to develop it, I'm not sure that's a deal breaker or an issue. I think the real question is what Tim's asking is creating that trail easement smack through the middle of these lots going to end up creating more conflict or less conflict in the end with the potential residents of those homes?
What do you think? I don't know.
Have you purchased any wetland credits for this project?
We are in the process of that. We just met with Mitch at the city. We're working with Tim Letterly on this, and he is in the process of filling out our application to purchase wetland credits.
Yeah.
Can you describe for me what you think these conflicts would be?
Well, I think that my thought was that with homeowners owning lots that go beyond the other side of the easement, that now lots will be split by a easement that a fair number of people will still use and will continue to use. Just the potential that people might take exception that people are riding their bikes or ATVs or snowmobiles through that area, which
Maybe someone
clearly
was asserting sovereignty over it when
Well,
maybe it shouldn't be there.
yeah, just by, if you think you own the property on the other side, you have some concerns
But
about.
it should be clear to them, that they're in the house. They don't really own the property.
That's true, but could you offset a potential problem in the future? I mean, there's
Yeah.
no
So I
value
get
to
what you're
that
saying.
land on the other side right now,
Okay, so
because
I
it's
understand.
almost entirely in wetlands. I mean, the only area that's not in wetlands is this little island in lot 8.
Yep.
And beyond that, it's entirely in the wetland. So if it was set aside as an outlot, we achieve the same thing, but potential for a future conflict might be averted
By simply saying that's not part of the law.
It's just not part of their lot, yeah.
That's an interesting situation because it's a land trust. It's not really land ownership.
It's not.
It's not, but I've kind of always understood or been given the impression that people treat it like it's their own yard, and
They do.
So,
Well,
They
can,
do.
this is
and
all
if-
about perception here.
yeah, and they
They're
can park
gonna-
things back there and.
If they're gonna
Use
make
it.
any improvements, they have to meet all city codes as far as putting any new buildings on it, et cetera, et cetera. I'm more than happy to take that back to One Roof and ask the question, if that's a recommendation of planning and zoning. The only question I would have then, if that were to take place, would the surveying have to be redone? Would all the boundaries have to be recreated? I mean, what would that
So
look
far,
like?
we could just state the first front 4 lots, because
Okay.
we don't have final approval yet. So
Yep.
it would be a redrawing of the plat, but it wouldn't be a bunch of physical work
Okay.
to do that. I guess, a couple things that I'm just thinking about, because I get the message that the trail is kind of close by the houses too, and that people use ATVs and snowmobiles, so definitely something, to think about there, but, and in terms of people owning those lots, I mean, I think there was an effort to make them, the size of, like, there's a 10,000 minimum, you guys understand the setbacks, that whole thing, but I think because of the work that the only way that One Roof can get permission from the state and the federal agencies that approve the wetland impacts is if they apply for permission to affect those wetlands for the whole site all at once. So after they get permission to put the houses in the locations that you see on here, it is not gonna get approved to put houses anywhere else or garages. So those wetlands up above, they're not something that people can put houses on or even fill like driveways into this site
Okay,
is
so-
gonna be pretty likely to be fixed in terms of wetland
So that-
impacts.
that corrects what you were saying. Okay. What about moving the trail back?
No. I mean, it's based on a road bed that's pretty old.
Okay.
It would take us a lot of work to move it, and would also be impacting a lot of wetlands.
Okay.
It's a real nice trail. I
I mean, it's historically done there for, forever.
Probably years,
You know,
yeah.
I mean, it's-
Yeah.
Well, my only thought on that is that if there was a potential to alleviate some future problems by creating it as an outlot, then not giving it to the homeowners south of the trail, that might be something to consider, and it wouldn't affect the homeowner's ability to build because the sites have already been set aside and they really can't do anything on the other side of that easement anyway.
In this case, trail's there before the homeowner is.
Yep.
So it's not like you're adding a trail that's traffic behind an existing owner. I mean, they will know when they buy this that there's a trail there.
Yeah, I mean, I just raise it as a question. I really am not gonna, say that this has to be done, but I think potential is there for a homeowner to raise concerns in the future. And
Finally, finding this, all these things is an issue, and, I would be concerned about, setting up another whole regime of surveying and legal work to re-identify all this stuff.
I mean, I think the point that the homeowners are gonna be aware of the trail at the time that they purchase their houses is actually, a super important argument. I mean, it doesn't affect whether or not to set that land aside as an outlot or not, but it isn't gonna come in as some kind of surprise to people,
Okay. Any other questions or comments by the commission? Otherwise, we will open it up to the public for any questions they might have.
I recommend we open it up to public discussion.
Okay. if you could step forward if you want to ask a question and identify yourself again for the camera and also for our record. And also, I think there was a handout sheet that went around asking for people to just put their names so we can make sure we have everybody recorded that is at the meeting. If you haven't signed in yet,
Everybody's on there,
Lost everybody.
I got you, Bill.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
I put her on there.
don't be shy. Who wants to be first?
Yeah, I'd be first.
We have-
So, I'm Howard Hedstrom, President of the EDA. This is a project that we've been working diligently on for quite a long time. I'm very happy to have it as far along as it is. It's going to provide workforce housing, which is sorely needed in our community. We've partnered up with a really good developer in One Roof. I think they've been very diligent and very good at listening to concerns here and in the public in general. So I just would really encourage moving forward with this project. Thanks.
Thank you.
Jim Roy, I live down on 14th Avenue. My concern is with whatever this road is called in here on your water runoff coming down here, where it makes the 90 degree. What's your grade from your road down to that first culvert? I'm having a hard time seeing how many feet are dropping there. Just to see the volume of water that we have in a normal spring when it's still frozen.
It's 1.5%, so every 100 feet you're dropping 1.5 foot, which on this map is 80 feet, so you're dropping about a foot.
A foot and 80 feet to get that water to go at a 90 degree in the I just don't see how you're going to be able to handle that volume that quick to go to the right on a normal spring runoff. Ground's frozen, it's got nowhere to go. That's not a lot of grade for.
1.5%.
And was he talking from here to here?
A lot, there isn't a good,
Because this is more like 20 feet.
a lot of this site is actually going to this. This site is being split up into 4 different areas. If you can see, 1,
Pre-90 degree,
2,
post-90 degree.
3,
I think this
and
is-
4. So we're not running.
But you also have culvert underneath here that looks like it's directing it farther up the road, directing
And
it.
from what we've been able to identify and mapping above that culvert doesn't take the same amount of flow that the creeks on either side of the project do, and also the larger culvert down near the hammerhead of the turnaround does.
If I can make sure we're talking about the same thing, are you asking about the degree of slope before it hits the 90 or after the
No,
90?
I mean, after it hits the 90, because it's
Okay.
got to have slope to take that water
Take
at a
it
90
east.
degree turn when it's moving.
Right, yeah.
And with a 1 degree or whatever he said, to me, that doesn't seem like it's going to be enough to handle the volume to come down there, in a heavy rain or April snow when the ground's frozen and there's nowhere to saturate and go into the ground. That's where I'm going to be concerned.
Right.
I think that was the question I raised earlier.
Yes,
So when
but,
it gets to that point, what
You were
turns?
talking that culvert, he was talking the culvert to the west, or to the west of it that would need to be condemned or redone. And I just never heard him say anything about the water going through the culvert to the east of there.
Well, my recollection, you said both of them were failing.
I thought it was just the one that was failing.
This one is okay.
Can you show us
Just the
on a
one-
map what we're talking about here?
Yeah,
I mean,
The one was failing
Exactly, we don't
to
know
the
what.
east of their potential driveway, or west. The
Here,
one
I'll
where it's
pull your
gonna,
map, Tom.
the one that's gonna receive the water.
Let's hear you state that again. When you said the existing culvert was failing,
That was the culvert to the west of 14th.
okay, and the one to the east of 14th
in my opinion, in good condition.
Is adequate to handle the flow.
And that's the one with the one, you know, that's
Yes.
at 90
With
to 1
with the
degree.
1.5% slope, yes.
That scares me.
So you,
Concerns me.
your concern is too much water getting into this ditch, not the culvert itself, but
No,
getting to
yeah.
the culvert.
Making that 90 without the volume, you know, water wants to go downhill, yes. To make a 90-degree turn like that, like, I understand saturation and, you know, it's great if you move the water through. But when it's frozen, the water ain't trickling and filtering through anything, it's coming. And to make a 90-degree turn like that, to, you know,
To make the 90-degree turn is really no different than channeling it into a culvert to go underneath the road either. I don't know if that's maybe what you're getting at, and that has a potential to create more problems, and I guess
I see it jumping the road going straight.
Well, that's why I suggested going out and taking a look at what had been done between 9th and 10th, because it's the same situation where that bend is 90 degrees and it almost washed out the road before it was fixed. And what potential is here to be channeling
in doing
the same kind of thing. And
There was a problem on 11th there too, wasn't there?
that was a different issue, I think. The one where the city replaced the culvert.
Peterson's house had 3 feet of water and then it came down right down the road there on 11th Avenue.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
Elsie's another one, it came right down and I live on First Street, but the last sewer, as you know, the connection is right on the corner with a 90-degree, and it couldn't handle it. And in fact, my house, my basement, water came right back.
Yeah, and that has been corrected with the work that the city did to put in that new culvert, and
And where is that culvert over here at the?
that's the one just on the east end of the drawing.
Okay.
And
So
the
it
ditches-
actually shows 2 culverts on there. In reality, I think there's only 1 culvert
there
is functioning.
they're on, from my both reading survey and also being out on site examining those culverts, one is functioning 95% of the time, and then when you get to a larger storm event, the second culvert is then used as a secondary, we'll call it overflow culvert. So I do see them both functioning, just one functioning
Yeah.
in normal circumstances.
Probably one's a primary and.
Correct.
Step up.
I just want to mention, while we're waiting for the transition here also, that the roads on 10th and 11th don't have ditches that are anything like what's drawn on this. The ditches are pretty small, in the places that you're referring to where the water's been crossing over the road. Yeah, there really aren't a lot of ditches. And so this is kind of a different situation than that, where they're going to have a lot more water running across the road. This one's
We have
actually
capacity in the ditch to store water of both a 3-foot depth, 3-to-1 slope out, and then you have a 5-foot bottom and 3-to-1 slope, and then up to tie into existing, but then also up to continue. So you do have
Even
a,
on second.
we are talking on second, correct?
Yep.
So with your drawing here, you're showing an expanded ditch from what currently exists out there.
That's correct. It is a much larger, it is a larger ditch.
Because right now, the capacity is, I think, about a foot, 2 feet at the
It
most.
might be, it is a little bit darker on this page. You can see the bottom of the ditch runs along here about 5 feet from the road, and then it goes back up.
I just find it hard to believe there's that much grade there.
So there's a road coming in here?
No, it's gonna go through this driveway down to by Melissa's.
Oh, so it's not coming in alongside of me to you?
No, but what I'm worried about is a heavy flow. It's gonna
Jumping
jump
over the
coming
road.
down.
Yeah, because my name's Bev Green, I'm the homeowner just above him on the corner of 14th and 2nd. I'm also on the EDA board here. But you and I have been there since the early 90s.
Yeah.
And didn't they do some work on that little creek alongside of,
The Corps of Engineer just put in those, the same things you wanna talk about, like the rock,
Rip wrap.
rip wrap.
and do you think that helped?
No,
I mean,
they just filled in and they're,
I don't really notice that flow
Was
through
that
there.
along, coming from this The culvert.
Yep, the culvert that comes through and down 14th.
Yep. I know, 'cause boy, that thing gurgles when it rains. Oh, this week even it was gurgling.
Just an aside, I'm also on the fire department. Have there been hydrants plotted in this anywhere, or any of you talked with the city on what pressures might be there?
Don't have a pressure reading. I do have hydrants placed on the end of the utility line.
Just at the end?
Correct.
Nothing over in here or anything?
I guess I have to take a look. I don't.
Yeah, I had a hard time seeing any more than just the one on the end. I think.
It might be something to look into, just to make sure. It's a long way to pull a hose.
Yes. And we're roughly 300 to the intersection here from this hydrant, 300 down to this intersection where there's a hydrant. I don't see a problem with putting one in the middle as well. If
We would appreciate it.
That a long ways, 300
Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, we've got 1,000 feet, but oof, you're losing a lot of
pressure.
volume at 1,000 feet or 300 feet. Just something to think about.
So hydraulically, is there a benefit to his concern to increasing that grade to bring water away from that 90-degree angle more quickly? So water doesn't always behave the way I understand it to work. So
I would say near impossible, because we are working with the existing elevation of this culvert, and then we're also tying into the existing elevation of we're tying into the road along Second. Now we could.
Here, start it up in here.
Now what we're trying to avoid by, excuse me, your name was Jim. What Jim just suggested was the possibility of grading around the ditch into bring it down. Now we're talking
Make it two options.
two options, and then we're talking about wetland impacts, and also not keeping it in the ditch. We're taking it then out of the ditch with the quick review of what you suggested is the house here could be impacted, and then but also the wetland impacts that we're.
Well, if there's going to be enough water to affect that house, it's definitely going to affect us now.
Outside of the ditch, because it's controlled in the ditch, where there is no control mechanism.
It is a 5-foot deep ditch,
So-
and that, so then
We
the
don't know for
1-foot
sure
fall,
if
you
this
got
is
6
lining
feet
up.
of fall. If it fills up.
Sorry, but engineers' plans.
I think it's really hard to picture how different this ditch is from the
It
ditch
happens.
that's
No, I
there.
understand.
Do we have any good
We had,
ditches around?
when we submitted the preliminary, we had the existing, so those drawings show the existing ditch. I didn't bring one today, but it's in the packet and with the preliminary. It showed the existing conditions. And you'll see a big contrast between the ditch that exists and the ditch that's here.
Yeah, there's hardly a ditch at all on the north side of Second right now.
Small swale. It's only about a foot deep, I think, currently.
So is the Nordic Star Road, Drive Road, lined right up with 14th Avenue, Street, Avenue?
I don't think,
I didn't believe it was.
yeah, no, it doesn't, no.
Okay, so then we wouldn't
See it
have,
on that drawing.
we wouldn't have that on this one?
This is 14, this is their road.
Okay. So that's gonna water pushing down the road here. Right into my yard, if it doesn't hit the ditch there.
What Bev's asking about is sheet flow on the road itself that maybe wouldn't quite make it to the ditch, and where is it gonna end up?
In my yard.
We have a standard crown of 2% on the road. Any runoff that you'd get sheet flowing down the road, I can't say exactly how far up it, but we're talking a pretty small area that will not make it into the ditches here. And then also second crowns back to the north side.
No.
I don't know that it does.
Crown's right into my yard, because my yard floods right now badly.
Yeah, okay, the existing second does not. I see that the contour, I'm sorry, I apologize about that, the last statement, but the road that we are constructing does have a crown in the middle to convey that water into the ditches on the side. And that's,
So your
we
concern-
can't do anything more than that.
So your concern is that water that's running down the road will continue to cross and then...
Right into my yard, which I already get quite a bit of water runoff from Second.
So just shooting from the hip, that crown, under most rain circumstances, how far up from the crossing of the street will it not really be affecting runoff? 20 feet?
With,
Because everything else...
I haven't looked at it specifically for this site. I don't want to say without knowing more certain, I guess, for this
I think it
specific.
depends on-
It is something that I can address and kind of show as a grade break what's going to get to the ditches and what I believe in the road, what will make it down to Second Street.
I think it depends on the flow, too, how heavy the rain
Yes,
is.
it does, without question.
So most of the rain is trying to get to the curbs.
Correct.
But there might be a dome.
And then along with the suggestion to if not replace, but for sure assess the culvert crossing just to the west of 14th would be it's a possibility to rework those ditches as well. Now I can't speak to that because that's outside of the scope of our project. So
When we first built out there in 92, we didn't have as much water. Of course, we've had, I think, a lot more rain falls over the last 20 years. But we didn't have as much water end up in our yard as we do now. So I don't know if the road has shifted. Second Street has shifted more towards my house or what, but we end up with a lot more. You can come out to my house and see the mud and the dips in my yard and that from, the water runoff. I mean, I would like it to go away, but it doesn't go away. And we deal with it, but I don't know if I want more running down that road.
Well, it seems to me that there potentially could be less if the ditch on the north side of Second Street is deeper and can handle a greater capacity of water. I mean, right now, it's only about a foot deep, and you get any kind of rain, and it can run over the top of that. And I just don't know. I mean, certainly I'm not an engineer, but if you have a 3-foot ditch compared to a 1-foot ditch, there's a lot more capacity there. Whether it's adequate or will it prevent the water from still running across the road? I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Mary?
Can I ask a question that I'm not sure, but did the amount of water in your yard change after the street got paved?
No. Well,
because
it's been gradually getting worse and worse and worse, all the time. But I think we're having a lot heavier rains than what we used to have too, and because that creek next to me, between my house and 14th, I mean that thing gurgles all the time. It never used to gurgle. It was dried up half the time. Now I got a dog who goes in it all the time, comes back a mess.
I think that's known that rain events are more powerful
Yep.
with the coming years and the pretty recent years.
Yep.
And also maybe that our pre-existing standards simply weren't up to today's events. That's why we have to be holding to the highest standards we can on anything we go forward with.
Yep, and I appreciate you guys, doing that, being a little more restrictive and, looking out for it. But I guess I was just, thinking with this road coming down, meetings up with Second, if it's tarred, it's gonna gush first before, and there might be an incline going this way. You're still gonna get a pretty large amount of water.
Yeah, the grade coming down versus the crown is probably more severe than the crown.
It is.
Yeah.
There doesn't look like there's much of a grade back in that woods. I've been back in there, many, many times over the years, and there doesn't look like
it's a
there's lot of
10%,
grade.
which is fairly steep.
Versus the crown, which is
2% on the crown. Yeah. And before it does get to the road, about we have a 25 feet where we transition from the 10% to the a 3% where it meets the road. So it kind of it takes a, you can imagine a curve to meet the road. So you're not straight turn. So that's about 125 feet.
And I think
Is
Mike,
it paved? It's not paved.
the road won't be paved, that might help a little bit. But Mike, I think you touched on it a little bit, that should there be problems, down the road, that One Roof would be responsible for the, well, I don't want to say repair, but the,
Yeah, I don't know
Or-
how true any of that is or how specific we could be about what that means for people.
okay.
The documents we have now say that the road is dedicated to One Roof, but it doesn't go into detail about how they would maintain it or what maintenance is required. We don't have any documentation about what sort of maintenance would be required on this ditch. And there certainly isn't any language anywhere that says who's responsible for what if something goes wrong in the future.
But weren't you asking for that?
Well, I was hoping to see some documentation that at least talked about their maintenance intentions and responsibilities. That's different than liabilities. So we're just trying now, I think, to put in place a system that'll keep this working.
Mhm.
But that doesn't, there's no guarantees in anything.
Right.
So
Yeah,
we're just trying to do the best job we can to set it up right in the beginning.
yeah, so,
I think what we're trying to do is head off potential problems in the future, but we can't necessarily
see them all.
understand what they might be.
Yeah.
And, when a storm event happens and there's something that affects properties below Second Street, is that nature taking its course? Or
Yeah.
is it One Roof creating a problem that's creating a problem for those south of Second Street? It's harder for us to make that call.
Right. Well, I've been very fortunate not, to keep a dry basement and dry house and garage and everything, but yeah, the yard, takes a toll, and I guess I'd rather have a yard take the toll than my house, so. So, all
We'll
right.
ask if anybody else has any.
Thank you, guys.
Kathy?
I'm sorry, I'll sit down. I got to the meeting after your name was announced.
Tom Demas, I'm with
Tom,
North and Consulting.
my husband Dennis and I own the home on 1320 West Second Street. We're known as the little house with the big garage. We're very proud of that. And our little home has a fully furnished walkout basement, totally completely done, fireplace, bedrooms. In the 20 years we've owned it next year, one time we had water. The June flood of '09, our drain field was blocked a little bit. I'm really counting on you to protect our home, our investment, and my retirement plan. Okay?
And I can
I
assure
really
you,
am counting on you.
with what I presented, I'm not quite sure when you stepped in, but when I was telling the planning commission and everybody else in the audience that I'm held to a standard by the state that I submit these plans to them, that what I'm, this state, but I'm also held to a code that I follow, and as an engineers follow, that we're designing this to pre-existing conditions, and our runoff is going through a system of
Have you
stormwater
been out
treatment.
do you know where our home is?
I've been to the site. I can't
Well,
say I know exactly what
I guess
house
on
it
the
is.
map, I have no idea where my house is on the map, but
You're west of on the map.
we're west. Well, where 14th Avenue is going in, do we abut that?
No, we're
Is our
south,
property?
we're south we're not on the map, we don't
We're
show.
not on the map. Well, with the road. The one with 14th.
So,
14th is,
yeah, he can try to.
Okay.
14th is right here.
Okay, so that's
then
where
thi-
Jim lives, right? Because Jim turns by my house to go down his road.
So then this is most likely your driveway. Is there a electrical box and then a hydrant to the left onto the in between 14th and your driveway? So this is your driveway right here. Your house would be
The garage is closer to the hydrant than the house. The house is east of it, and when Jim turns down the existing 14th Avenue, he turns on the corner of our lot.
yes. So then you are located right here.
Let's put a little X on mine when we have time. So, okay, so I think that's all I have to say, is just that we are concerned You've had water.
And I appreciate that, and that's why we're here with One Roof, representing, as a representative with One Roof, to present it to the town and to the city and the residents. So.
I guess the only thing I would add, just as a side note, 20 years ago when we bought our home, it was considered affordable housing. I can assure you, today, it is the best investment we've ever made. And we were very grateful to buy our home 20 years ago. I love our home. So thank you, thanks. I'm excited for the people that had the opportunity to buy. I have people asking me already, so thank you, thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. Anybody else? Yep, step up.
So I'm Maggie Frischman, and I live right across 14th from Jim. And so, like everyone else, we're concerned about the water that potentially could come down in like a big rain event or like a spring that melts high. So I guess I have some smaller questions I'll save to the end. I think maybe they've already been covered, but I just wanted to clarify. But one of the questions I don't know that we've talked about yet is I'm curious about the water that's going to flow through this wetland area and go across that culvert by 14. Will, like with the houses back here, is there going to be more water flow coming through, and how will that be addressed, especially if that culvert maybe is not optimal?
That's, as I spoke earlier, that's part of our process when we're putting these houses in, is we could be creating more flow. In each instance there, I do have a system, being that those are going directly to the stream, that we can't capture those. But we have to capture each individually, so each individual house is getting some sort of treatment there that is collecting that flow before it is discharged into that stream.
Okay, so those systems are around the homes to basically slow the water then?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. And so then the remaining kind of big issue then is that culvert that, I mean, if it's not adequate, then the water would back up and come over the road kind of idea?
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, that's what could potentially happen.
Okay. And then I know it's not on the One Roof property, but as that water comes down 14th by Jim's house and kind of across 14th from our house, I guess what is your anticipation for how that will affect things? I mean, because there's a small culvert that runs under Jim's driveway.
And that I can't speak to. I can certainly take a look at it if the city requests me to, but it wasn't my responsibility. Is I understand the concerns and I appreciate those concerns, and it's everybody's concern. But what I'm looking at is to contain my flows on the site, and by doing that, I'm not to say it gently, we're not making the matter worse than it already would have been previously.
Okay.
So.
And that's in like the event of the 100-year floodish range?
100-year floods. And those numbers, 100-year flood, everybody knows that in the last, you can say that 100-year flood is happening every 10, 20 years now rather than every 100 years. Those numbers are updated annually as a national. We have maps that we get updated nationally for different regions, and so those numbers are put into our models. Can't say that some people don't agree that they've kept up to keep that 100-year storm 100 rather than a 500, but those numbers are updated annually, and we do continue to update our software to reflect the storms that are happening in recent history.
So theoretically, like the standards are going up. So.
They continue to be updated, correct? Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think the other questions I had, I think you've probably already covered this. But could you clarify the long-term drainage plan for the site? I understand there's the ditch checks and infiltration swales. Is that?
That's all encompassing, yeah. As part of that, and then as the agreement is worked out, that to maintain it would be part of that long-term.
And then I guess that leads into my other question to clarify. So there's been some talk kind of about some sort of a documentation or language discussing like One Roof's responsibility in maintaining things. Like in the event that One Roof either sold the property or was sold or something, is there any guarantee to people, like, living also in this, like, development, but also south of Second, that all those systems that are, you know, part of this bigger picture are maintained? Because, I mean, like, people south of Second could have their homes affected, but, I mean, absolutely people in the development too, in a big rain, if for some reason One Roof wasn't in charge anymore.
So I can share that the way the land trust works in Duluth and the other communities is that it's written into the lease that if for any reason something would happen to One Roof, the nonprofit, those homeowners would have the first right of refusal to buy that property. So we've never been in that situation before, but it's kind of a, our homeowners need to also know that if something should happen, that they have the right, so.
Oh, I guess the last is just a minor question. So for the homeowners and like the management of their property, we talked about the swales and how they'll be, you know, educated on the importance of those. My understanding is the trees are part of this, the drainage plan. Is there also some guidance on like their management of the trees? And maybe they want to cut a tree down, is that okay? Like, can they clear their lot? I mean, I don't know how that works with the land trust model.
That I can't enforce that. Yeah, I think you'd be getting into a sticky situation as far as trying to over-govern as far as what you can and can't do. Now, the city may or may not have ordinances for tree removal, but
When the last time we met, you said you were going to kind of, you don't want to come clear cut. Are you
Right.
going to have guidelines that here's your size of your lot, you are not to make your yard any bigger? Because the more they clear, the faster the water comes.
That's what my question mostly was.
So, you know, how do
water.
you, what's the guidelines that you're gonna put on them for their properties? Because what he's setting up now is the perfect plan where you build a house and there it sits. Well, like me, I like a nice yard, so I make my yard bigger and bigger and bigger. So now, water's gonna move faster. What's to stop them from going bigger and bigger and bigger, and water moving faster?
All we can do is impress upon them that this has been a professionally engineered site. I mean, we also have to work with the new home buyers of the properties. Can we add a restriction that you need approval from One Roof to not cut this tree or to cut this tree? I think that may go a little beyond the scope of what we're trying to do here. I mean,
Yeah,
our
that's-
hope is that these home buyers are going to be responsible people that understand
Well, it
that.
sounds different from what you said last time.
Yeah, I think
Well-
you said you're having a conversation with buyers here and your attorney to
Yes.
draw up declarations that will be impacting the buyers. And if there's some language that can be included in that to minimize the area of lawn that's planted over retention of natural conditions on the site, you know, that might be, and buyers might have some ideas how to address that, because I think that's probably been used in other subdivisions around the county.
Is there a runoff calculation about tree coverage?
it's part of the model, yes, and
And
it changes.
Do you have a certain percentage of tree coverage figured into your model?
I don't have that off the top of my head.
So that would be a statistic,
Right.
a hard, cold number that could be used, that if it goes below it, then your runoff model might not be accurate anymore. So that might be something that can inform
Theoretically,
buyers.
yeah.
So we're happy to address, you know, taking a look at that. But I think it's a very fine line.
Yeah, I know what
It'll
he's
be,
doing.
yeah.
But what he's
Yeah.
planning and what he's engineering is gonna be different in 10 years to what the homeowners have done. So we need, you know, so his plans in 10 years could be, you know, off 20% and we're getting water that much faster, or, you know, 10% that much faster. We're this 90-degree turn, and I don't care how many of these ditch breaks you put in there.
You gotta remember too that construction disrupts
the tree system, you know, with the roots and things. I mean, we lost a lot of trees in our neighborhood just from construction. When we built our home that we didn't want to take out, but after, you know, a few years, the root system got damaged and down they went.
I think you had mentioned earlier that you were going to have some kind of requirement that the people can't tamper with the grading, the ditches.
Correct.
Could there be something included in that language where we say you need to try and maintain a certain percentage of tree coverage? If construction damages roots, if trees die off, whose obligation is it to replant, to try and maintain that coverage? Maybe simplify it to the point where it says this equals roughly 10 trees per lot, or something like that. Try and keep the count around there. Something that is, you know, easy for people to track and follow. I don't know what your enforcement mechanism is or something like that, but I assume you thought of something because you also felt you could prevent people from digging into the ditches and altering them. So.
We're happy to talk about any restriction that the city is going to tell us we have to enforce.
So any other
Just
questions?
one more, and I think too that, you know, we want to remember that we are living up in the North Woods and we all moved up here for a reason that, you know, I don't want to, you know, come into the neighborhood someday and see all the trees taken out of there either and have this huge development across there too, so, and then that takes away from the Nordic Star name of, you know, think of that and I think of peace and quiet and so I think just, you know, the aesthetics too of the neighborhood.
Any other comments, questions?
We're just talking about the first 4 lots here, right? The first 4 homes that are on the bottom.
Well, that's what they've suggested is going to be their first phase of development, but the subdivision that we're looking at is the complete subdivision of the whole parcel.
And then you've got the multi-family, those 4 buildings that could come up afterwards. There's 11 units.
Those lots are being created. We haven't seen any real proposal on that development of that portion of the property. We're talking about really just the subdivision and creation of the lots at this point.
Okay.
Of just the homes, single family homes, right?
Well, the lots would
12
be
lots.
created that would be there, so One Roof could come back at some point to make a request for the multi-family, but they would have to come back through a separate process to do that. But what we're looking at is the subdivision of the land to create these lots as it's shown here. Any other questions? Hearing none, I think we'll close it to public question and comment and turn it back to the Planning Commission for thoughts on how we want to proceed.
I think philosophically, if we just make sure that we maintain at least a 100-year flood plan precaution and try not to allow things that would occur that would compromise any kind of 100-year flood plan ideas, such as perhaps the loss of trees or something like that might take it below the 100 flood plan calculation. But also look at opportunities to customize this to maybe take it a little bit beyond the 100-year flood plan. Like you had mentioned in your concerns at that 90-degree turn, that it be reinforced with riprap. That we look for those opportunities and make sure we address them and forward that recommendation to the council.
I mean, there's a couple things that I think we've identified that I think need to be available to the council prior to the council giving final approval, and add to anything you think I may have missed here, but a couple things that I took notes on. One is that the MPCA permit be secured and be available for the council to review prior to final approval. That those grading swales that we haven't seen be included as part of any engineering drawings or plans that we have available. The question of whether there was a need for a second hydrant at that 90-degree corner, I think should be addressed and evaluated by the fire department to make sure that we have adequate spacing on that location of those hydrants. And it might be okay, but, you know, I think it would be worthwhile to have the fire department take a look at that. The work with Byers Heron regarding the declarations, you know, we should have those declarations in hand before the council takes final action on those declarations. I think we should also look to having some language that recognizes the importance of retention of the natural soils and vegetative cover that's there. I'm not going to suggest that we have a specific language that we want to include, but you know, I think that there's you get the point that that's an important part of the consideration.
But also in that language, maintaining the engineering that's created when this is built.
Yes.
So that the engineering doesn't degrade over time and you
Yes.
lose your effectiveness.
All right, I'd like to make a motion that we approve this subject to those conditions that you mentioned, particularly the approval of the stormwater management.
Tim, did you
And,
get all your conditions?
I got 'em.
I think that's all that
I'll go over them with Tim just to make sure I got them all.
She's got it.
I just want to make sure you got through this list. I saw I'm working through something.
5 for sure with the logo by on 6.
And I don't know if there's anything else anybody else wanted to add, but Hal just made a motion to approve the request with stipulations that this additional information be provided prior to city council approval or city council review. Is there a second? Motion's been made and seconded. Michael? Are there any other comments, thoughts? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the request as presented with those conditions, vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. So this will be referred to the council once those additional items are available. You know, I think you've done a lot of work to try to get this so that it does meet those concerns that we've addressed, and I think there's still some areas that need to be further evaluated. You know, like I think Jim and myself have suggested that 90-degree corner. Water just doesn't turn naturally, so you know, figuring that out is I think probably one of the most critical items of the stormwater design.
I would like to congratulate Howard Hedsom, the chairman of the EDA, for all the work and time and efforts, and Bev too, Green, that put into this project, which is definitely a needed item in this county.
And Hal, and Mary. Thank you guys.
And I appreciate that everybody has shown up here and participated in this process, because, you know, we wouldn't know nearly as much about what's happening south of 2nd Street without the input that you've given, so thank you for being part of the process. We are adjourned.
Right, pretty fast.